The sound of crystal clinking against crystal floated through the air, layered over the gentle hum of a string quartet. White rose petals lay scattered along the aisle like fallen snow, their fragrance blending with the faint scent of champagne that had already been poured in anticipation of the toasts. Candles flickered in tall glass cylinders, each flame swaying slightly in the whisper of the air conditioning. It was the kind of wedding you'd see on the cover of a luxury lifestyle magazine, perfect in its precision, immaculate in its execution. From my seat near the front, I could see my brother Ethan standing at the altar, his fingers twitching at his cuffs. His smile was bright enough to blind a room, but I knew that smile. It was the same one he'd worn during high-stakes business negotiations. Polished, charming, and entirely unreadable. To the rest of the guests, he was a man deeply in love, standing on the precipice of forever. To me, he was my little brother who'd clawed his way through our parents' messy divorce and the relentless grind of inheriting a crumbling family business. Today was supposed to be his redemption arc. Hannah, my wife of 8 years, sat beside me in a navy dress that set off the warmth of her skin. She squeezed my hand tighter than usual, her nails digging in just enough for me to notice. Her lips curved upward in a polite smile, but her eyes were somewhere else. I told myself she was just tired. She'd always hated crowded events, and Ethan's guest list leaned heavily toward the elite and self-congratulatory. The officiant cleared his throat, and the murmurs in the room faded into reverent silence. Ethan's bride-to-be, Alyssa, appeared at the far end of the aisle, a halo of light catching on the beaded veil that trailed behind her. Gasps of admiration rippled through the audience. Somewhere behind me, a champagne cork popped too early. It was then, just as the music softened and the officiant began to speak, that Hannah leaned toward me, her breath brushing my ear. "We have to leave. Now." The words didn't register at first. I glanced at her, frowning, my voice low. "Why, are you feeling sick?" Her eyes flicked away from mine. "I'll explain in the car. Please, don't make a scene." A slow, almost imperceptible shiver ran the length of my spine. Her grip tightened, and I could feel the pulse in her palm, fast, uneven. Around us, people were watching the bride's every step, oblivious to the fact that the world under my feet had just tilted. I looked back at Ethan, who was still smiling, his gaze locked on Alyssa as if nothing else existed. For a second, I considered refusing Hannah, telling her that whatever it was could wait until after the vows, but something in her voice, a thread of urgency woven with dread, kept me from arguing. We slipped out through a side door, our departure masked by the swell of the quartet's melody. The cool air outside hit me like a slap, the noise of the wedding replaced by the muted hush of the parking lot. Hannah walked quickly, heels clicking on the pavement, not looking back. The first 10 minutes in the car were filled with nothing but the rhythmic thump of the tires on the road. City lights blurred past in gold and white streaks. I could feel the weight of something unspoken pressing against the windows, suffocating in its intensity. At the 15-minute mark, I finally said her name. "Hannah." She didn't respond. Her jaw was set, her gaze fixed ahead as though the road might swallow her if she dared to blink. "Hannah, talk to me." "What's going on?" My voice came out sharper than I intended, but I couldn't stand the silence anymore. She exhaled slowly, almost as if bracing herself for impact. Then, finally, she turned to me, and in the dim glow of the dashboard lights, I saw it. The guilt, heavy, unfiltered, and devastating. "You really didn't notice," she said softly, almost with disbelief. "Notice what?" Her lips trembled into a bitter smile. "The real purpose of that wedding." I gripped the steering wheel tighter. "And what purpose is that?" She looked away, her voice barely more than a whisper. "It wasn't a beginning. It was a goodbye. To us. To everything you think is real. And just like that, the night, and my life, shifted into something unrecognizable." Her words lingered in the stale warmth of the car like smoke. Dense, bitter, impossible to ignore. It wasn't a beginning. It was a goodbye. The streetlights threw shifting patterns across her face as we drove, each flicker revealing a new emotion. Defiance, sorrow, fear. My hands were tight on the wheel, knuckles blanched, the leather creaking softly under my grip. I wanted to demand an explanation, to shake the truth out of her. But there was something about the way she sat, perfectly still, like a person balancing on the edge of a cliff, that made me afraid of the answer. Finally, she spoke again, her voice quieter now, almost as if confessing to herself rather than to me. "I've been seeing Ethan." It was as if the car hit an invisible wall. My stomach hollowed, my ears rang, and the edges of my vision darkened. The words didn't land all at once. They dripped in, each syllable heavy and cold, seeping into every corner of me. For a moment, I laughed, not because it was funny, but because the absurdity of it was too sharp to process. You mean my brother Ethan? I said, my voice brittle. She didn't flinch, just a slow, deliberate nod. Outside the car, the city kept moving, couples crossing streets, neon signs buzzing, taxis blurring yellow against the night. Inside, time slowed to a suffocating crawl. How long? I finally asked. Her answer came without hesitation, which told me she'd rehearsed this moment in her head. Almost a year. Almost a year. An entire cycle of birthdays, holidays, dinners at our table. Every smile at a family gathering suddenly felt like a counterfeit bill I'd accepted without checking. My mind ran back through every interaction, every laugh between them that I had dismissed as nothing. Why are you telling me now? I asked, my voice low, more tired than angry. She shifted in her seat, eyes fixed on the road ahead, because I realized something today watching her walk down the aisle. Her? Alyssa. Your brother's bride. The way she said the name was flat, almost resentful. I thought I was special. She continued. I thought I was different. But sitting there I understood I was just one of many. Warm-up act. He's been with other women. A lot of them. Even this week. The air between us thickened. My pulse pounded in my ears, but there was an odd detachment growing inside me too. A part of me that was already stepping back, watching this moment as if from outside my body. She reached into her clutch and pulled out a small envelope, sliding it onto the center console without looking at me. I didn't want to tell you like this, but you need to see it. I hesitated before picking it up, almost afraid of what might be inside. The photographs were glossy, time-stamped, Ethan in various cities with various women, intimate moments stolen from hotel hallways, dim restaurants, even a balcony with the skyline behind them. One image was dated 2 nights before the wedding. He told me once that marrying her was going to change everything. Hannah said, her voice cracking. I called her his golden key, said her family connections would open doors he could never get into on his own. And just like that, something in my memory snapped into place. The way Ethan's struggling business had magically rebounded last year, the expensive watch he said was a gift from a grateful client, the overseas trips that never quite lined up with the projects he claimed to be working on. I'd been too willing to believe him, too invested in the idea that my brother had finally found stability. Now, every piece slid together into an ugly, complete picture. Hannah turned toward me then, her eyes wet but steady. You always trusted him. But this, she gestured to the photos, this isn't about love. It's about power. And you're standing right in the middle of it without even knowing. I didn't answer. The city blurred into darkness as we left the main roads, and the silence in the car changed. It wasn't just awkward anymore. It was dangerous. I pulled over, the engine ticking as it cooled, and sat there with the weight of betrayal pressing down on my chest. There was anger, yes, but beneath it was something far more potent, clarity. 2 betrayals in one breath. My brother, my wife. The 2 people I'd have defended without hesitation. And now, both of them had carved pieces out of me without leaving so much as a scar I could see. But they'd made one mistake. They thought I would break quietly. I turned to Hannah, my voice calm in a way that felt almost alien. Tell me everything, every detail, every name, every lie, because in that moment my grief became something sharper, the first edge of a plan. The night air outside the car was sharp, tinged with the faint metallic scent of rain on asphalt. I'd rolled the window down halfway, needing something, anything, to cut through the suffocating stillness inside. Hannah sat with her hands folded in her lap now, the photos back in the envelope, as if tucking them away could undo the truth they carried. I studied her in the dim wash of the street lamp. Guilt clung to her like a shadow, but so did something else, relief. She'd unburdened herself, passed the weight into my hands, and now waited to see what I'd do with it. What she didn't realize was that I wasn't going to hurl it back at her. I wasn't going to shout or cry or beg for answers I already had. I was going to hold it, turn it over, and find the sharpest edge. You said I'm in the middle of this? I said quietly. Explain. She glanced at me, searching my face for a flicker of the old me, the brother who believed in family first, the husband who assumed love was enough. But he was gone now, replaced by someone who'd learned in the span of 20 minutes that loyalty is only as strong as the leverage behind it. Ethan isn't just using her for money, she said. It's more than that. Her family, they have influence. Real influence. He bragged once, late at night, that marrying her would unlock doors no business deal ever could. Judges, politicians, investors. He said her father signs blank checks for the people he trusts. The words sat between us like a loaded gun. My mind was already running ahead, piecing together things I'd overlooked. Ethan's sudden influx of capital, the shift in his social circles, the way people with no reason to respect him suddenly did. "He's playing a long game?" I murmured. Hannah nodded. "And you were never supposed to see it." That last line landed harder than I expected. I wasn't just collateral damage. I was the one person who could unravel him, because I knew who Ethan really was beneath the polish. That made me dangerous. I started the engine again, but instead of heading home, I turned down a different street, one that cut toward the darker part of downtown. "Where are we going?" Hannah asked. "Somewhere quiet," I said. We ended up in an all-night diner, the kind with flickering neon and coffee that tastes faintly of burnt toast. A place where no one cared who you were or why you looked like the ground had dropped out from under you. We slid into a booth in the far corner, the vinyl squeaking under our weight. I ordered coffee I didn't want, more for the cover of something steaming between us than for the taste. When the waitress left, I leaned forward. "Here's what's going to happen," I said, my tone low but steady. "You're going to tell me everything, not just about you and Ethan. About every conversation, every name, every little scrap of information you remember. I don't care how small it seems. If I'm in the middle of this, I need the map." She hesitated, fingers curling around her mug. "And then what?" I held her gaze. "And then I burn it all down. Quietly. Permanently. No one sees me coming until they're already in the fire." Something flickered in her expression. Fear maybe, or recognition. She knew Ethan well enough to understand what I was saying, that the only thing more dangerous than an angry man is a patient one. For the next 2 hours, she talked. Names of women. Details about Ethan's business trips. Hints he'd dropped about investments that never appeared in his official accounts. The strange offshore phone number he'd call in the middle of the night. Every puzzle piece slid onto the table between us. By the time she was done, the coffee had gone cold and the diner had emptied. I had more than enough to start. As we left, the rain finally came soft and cold against my face. I stood under it for a moment, letting it wash away the last of the man who would have forgiven, who would have believed blood and vows could outweigh ambition. The decision was made before I'd even realized I was making it. This wasn't going to be about confronting Ethan or demanding an apology. This was going to be about precision, about cutting the supports so quietly he wouldn't even know he was falling until the ground hit him. And the first step was simple: find out exactly how deep his golden key turned in the lock. Because if Ethan had built his empire on someone else's trust, I was going to be the one to change the locks. The rain hadn't stopped by the time I made my first call. Drops streaked down the diner's fogged window as I stepped outside, the phone pressed tight against my ear. The line rang 3 times before a groggy voice answered. "James, it's me." There was a pause. "You realize it's almost 2 in the morning? I wouldn't call if it wasn't important. I need a favor." James didn't hesitate long. We'd known each other since college, bonded over late, night-hacking competitions and the kind of legal pranks that left us with stories we couldn't tell on job interviews. He also owed me. Once, years ago, I'd pulled him out of a mess that could have cost him his company. "What kind of favor?" he asked. "The kind that needs to be quiet, thorough, and leave no trace." A beat of silence. "Whose neck are you stepping on?" "My brother's." I heard the click of his desk lamp switch on through the phone. "Text me the details." By morning we had a plan. Hannah's recollections gave me starting points, burner emails, suspicious travel dates, and the name of the messaging app Ethan had been careful to hide. James would do the digging. I'd handle the pieces that needed a physical presence. The first week was nothing but waiting and collecting. Receipts from hotels booked under names Ethan had never used before. Bank statements showing cash withdrawals that lined up perfectly with his business trips. Photos pulled from cloud storage he'd thought was private. By the 5th day, the pattern was undeniable. Ethan had built a house of cards out of lies, and every single one had a timestamp. But I wasn't rushing. The temptation to go straight to Alyssa or her father burned in my chest, but there was more at stake than just exposing him. Ethan was careful. The wrong move could give him time to spin it, bury it, or worse, come after me. Late one night, James sent me a message, "Got something you'll want to see. Video call in 10. When his feed came up, he was smirking in that dangerous way he got when he knew he'd struck gold. "Your brother's got a problem with bragging," he said, sharing his screen. There it was, a private chat with one of his closest friends. "Marrying Alyssa is the smartest financial decision I've ever made. Her old man basically prints money. I just have to keep the act up long enough to get what I want. James let the words hang there. How much you want to bet her father's never seen this? That was the moment the path ahead sharpened in my mind. Gerald Langdon wasn't just a wealthy man. He was a fortress, the kind who valued loyalty above all else and destroyed anyone who made him look like a fool. But approaching him was a risk. If he thought I had an agenda, he might close ranks around Ethan just to protect his own image. I needed to make sure that when I walked into his office, I wasn't asking him to believe me. I was showing him something he couldn't unsee. I started assembling it. A black binder, leather-bound, the kind you could slide across a boardroom table. Every page a nail in the coffin. Flutos, transactions, conversations, travel logs. Dates cross-referenced with events Ethan claimed to attend but never did. In between the long nights and early mornings, the weight of it all pressed in. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about what Ethan had done to my family, twisting loyalty into a tool, making me the last to know because he assumed I'd be too blinded by blood to act. Sometimes, alone in my apartment, I'd catch myself wondering if there was any part of him that had been real. The kid who used to build forts with me in the backyard, the teenager who'd sworn we'd stick together, no matter what our parents did to us. Was he still there, buried under all the ambition and deceit? Or had I been talking to a ghost for years without realizing it? But then I'd think about Hannah's trembling voice in the car, the look on Alyssa's face as she walked toward him, without knowing what kind of man she was marrying, and my doubt would harden into something cold and certain. By the time the binder was ready, I'd already secured my way in. A polite, carefully worded email to Gerald's assistant, marked urgent, promising information about a matter of personal and financial importance regarding his family. James had set it up to bounce from 3 dummy accounts before landing in her inbox. Just enough to catch attention without looking desperate. The reply came 2 days later. Mr. Langdon will see you. 15 minutes. No more. The night before the meeting, I barely slept. I rehearsed every sentence, every page turn, every pause. This wasn't just delivering evidence. It was loading the first round in a chamber I'd never get to fire twice. When I finally walked into Gerald Langdon's office, the air felt heavier. He sat behind a desk big enough to park a car on, his expression carved from stone. "You have something for me," he said. Not a question. I placed the binder on the desk, opened it to the first page, and started talking. Gerald didn't speak while I presented the binder. He didn't need to. Each page was another weight dropping into the silence. Timestamp photographs, financial transfers, screenshots of messages Ethan never thought would see daylight. I turned the pages slowly, deliberately, letting him sit with each one before moving on. When I finished, the only sound was the low hum of the air conditioning. Gerald closed the binder, his palm resting on it as if it might try to escape. His jaw was locked tight, but his eyes had gone somewhere cold. "You did the right thing," he said finally. "Leave this with me. I'll handle my end." It wasn't a request, it was a verdict. 2 days later, Ethan's post-wedding business gala arrived, a celebration of his new partnership with Langdon Global. The Langdon Plaza Hotel ballroom was all glass and chandeliers, the kind of place where success had a scent, expensive perfume, polished wood, and champagne fizz. I stood outside, across the street in the dim glow of a hotel bar, waiting for my cue. Inside, Ethan worked the crowd with Alyssa on his arm, the image of charm. Cameras flashed, champagne glasses clinked, and Gerald himself stood at the podium, smiling faintly as he welcomed the guests. I could imagine Ethan's thoughts. That he had won, that the door he'd been trying to pry open for years had finally swung wide. At 9:43 p.m., my phone buzzed. A single text from Gerald's assistant now. I took a sip of my drink, nodded to the man at the tech booth I'd paid in advance, and leaned back in my chair. The ballroom lights dimmed. The projector screen flared to life. The first image was simple. Ethan, shirt half undone, kissing a woman who wasn't his wife in a dim hotel hallway. A ripple moved through the crowd. A cough. A muttered, "What the hell?" Then came the second slide, a spreadsheet of hotel stays and transfers, each one labeled with dates that overlapped Ethan's supposed business trips. Gasps. The rustle of dresses. Someone's glass shattering on the floor. The third slide was the nail. A screenshot of the chat James had found. "Marrying Alyssa is the smartest financial decision I've ever made. Her old man basically prints money. I just have to keep the act up long enough to get what I want." The murmurs swelled into open outrage. Alyssa's face froze, her fingers stiffening around the champagne flute before she set it down and stepped away from Ethan like he'd burned her. Gerald didn't move. Didn't need to. The security detail did it for him, cutting through the crowd and flanking Ethan in seconds. From my seat across the street, I could see Ethan trying to talk his way out, hands raised, face pale but defiant. He turned toward Gerald, but Gerald just shook his head once, a slow final motion, and turned his back. The cameras were still flashing, but now they were aimed like weapons. Every click was a nail sealing Ethan into a box he'd built himself. By 10:15 p.m., it was over. The merger announcement was scrapped. Gerald's PR team released a carefully worded statement about severe breaches of trust. By morning, every business blog in the city had the story, accompanied by the same grainy hotel photo and the damning quote from the chat log. I didn't need to imagine the rest. The calls from investors pulling out, the reporters camping outside Ethan's apartment, the quiet humiliation of watching every door he'd clawed open slam shut again. What I hadn't expected was the envelope waiting for me at my office 3 days later. Heavy paper embossed with the Langdon family crest. Inside was a single note in neat handwriting. You exposed what I refused to see. My respect and my thanks. If you ever wish to discuss the future, my door is open. Signed, Gerald. I didn't smile. Not yet. Revenge isn't a moment. It's a slow erosion. And this was only the first tide. That night, alone in my apartment, I poured a glass of scotch and sat by the window, watching the city breathe. I thought about the boy who used to share a bedroom with me, who whispered plans about escaping our parents' fights, who swore we'd have each other's backs. I thought about how far from that boy Ethan had wandered, and how, in some ways, maybe I had too. Because this wasn't about justice anymore. It wasn't even about Hannah or Alyssa or Gerald. It was about making sure I never again mistook proximity for loyalty. Somewhere across town, Ethan was probably sitting in a room just like mine, except his was smaller, darker, and quieter. And maybe he was thinking about all the people he'd used, all the hands he'd shaken while holding a knife behind his back. Or maybe he was already planning his next move. It didn't matter, because whatever game he played next, I'd already rewritten the rules. And if he ever tried to walk back into my life, I wouldn't need a binder or a projector to end it. I'd only need to close the door. It's been almost a year since the night of the gala. The headlines have faded, replaced by new scandals and fresher prey for the city's gossip columns. But for Ethan, there's no forgetting. He lives now in the shadow of his own name, in a cramped rental far from the skyline he once flaunted. The photographs of him laughing in glass-walled boardrooms have been replaced by grainy shots of him slipping out of convenience stores, collar up, eyes down. The calls for help have slowed to a trickle. At first, he tried to resurrect himself. A new startup, a few investors desperate enough to take a chance. But the stain never washed out. Contracts fell through. Numbers didn't add up. The same people who toasted him over champagne now crossed the street to avoid being seen with him. And after the dust settled, moved to another city. We spoke once months ago over coffee in a quiet corner of a train station cafe. She told me she was in therapy, trying to understand why she'd let herself be drawn into Ethan's orbit, why betrayal had felt like attention. There were no pleas for forgiveness, no attempts to reopen anything between us. Just two people who had shared a war zone and were now walking in opposite directions. I wished her well, and meant it. Alyssa vanished from the public eye, retreating to Europe. I heard through a mutual acquaintance that she'd taken up work with an art restoration studio in Florence, a quieter life, maybe a truer one. As for me, I left the city entirely. I traded glass towers and crowded streets for a lakeside cabin 2 hours north, where the mornings smell like pine and coffee, and the nights are so still you can hear the water breathe. I still work, consulting, advising, but it's on my terms now. My calendar isn't a weapon anymore. Some evenings, I sit on the porch with a book and watch the light fade over the water. Sometimes I think about what happened, and sometimes I don't. But when I do, it's not with the heat of anger anymore. It's with the clarity that comes from knowing exactly where you stand, and exactly who you are when the smoke clears. I've started seeing someone new. She's not dazzling in the way people use that word, not loud or dramatic. She's grounded, thoughtful, with a way of listening that makes silence feel safe. We take things slowly. There's no urgency here, no performance. The other day, while we were walking through the woods near the cabin, she stopped, looked at me, and said, "You seem like someone who's been through fire and came out with something worth keeping." I thought about that for a while after, because she's right. I went into that storm thinking revenge would be the prize. The image of Ethan stripped bare in front of the people he'd tried so hard to impress. And yes, that moment was sharp, clean, satisfying. But it wasn't the crown. The real victory came later, in the quiet. In the way I could look in the mirror without flinching. In the way the people still in my life are there because they choose to be, not because they're tied to me by blood or obligation. In the way no one, not Ethan, not Hannah, holds a single thread that could unravel me. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that the loudest revenge burns out quickly. People move on. The spectacle fades. But the kind that lasts, that's the kind where you build something so steady, so untouchable, that they can't even find a way to knock it down. Because the truth is, I don't think about Ethan every day anymore. That might be the deepest cut of all. For him to realize he's no longer the villain in my story, just a footnote in a chapter I've already closed, the world will forget him. I already have. And if he ever tries to climb out of whatever hole he's dug for himself, he'll find there's no rope waiting, no hand reaching down. Just the echo of a door closing. Maybe that's the part people don't understand about revenge. It's not about destroying someone in front of an audience. It's about walking so far away from the stage that their applause, or their jeers, can't touch you. It's about wearing a crown they can't see, in a kingdom they'll never be invited to.